Well, listen, let's get into recruiting, Ike. It wasn't all good just a week ago. Hugh Freeze goes on vacation and seems like all hell broke loose in terms of recruiting. Auburn saw two decommitments, missed out on a few other guys who went elsewhere. Um, but this week brought a change. Auburn picked up two commitments, one from three-star Hollis Davidson, the tight end, who was previously committed but decommitted so that he could take other visits. After taking in those visits, he realized that he in fact will be an Auburn Tiger. So he pledged his commitment back to Auburn. And just yesterday, three-star Jacobe Ward, inside offensive lineman of Benedictine, I hope I'm saying that right, military school. He just committed, and he's the fifth O-line commitment in the 2024 class. Just a reminder that Auburn last year signed three offensive linemen last year, and in Hugh Freeze's initial season or initial recruiting season, he picked up some linemen. It seems as though offensive tackle was a position that was much neglected over the past few years. It seems like we couldn't buy a tackle,
Right.
figuratively and literally, right? And we got three committed now, two in last recruiting cycle. It seems like things have changed as it pertains to prioritizing the offensive line position. Granted, we're going to be losing some guys this year, so obviously they had to hit the recruiting trail hard. But talk about the fact that Auburn is actually going after offensive linemen and getting some of the guys that they're wanting on their board.
Yeah, listen, this is something that the last two coaching staffs didn't get right. Right. Like the major failures, I think, for Auburn in recruiting had been the lack of talent or NFL caliber talent along the offensive line. And this is something that Coach Hugh Freeze came in and his staff decided was going to be a priority for them is to revamp those rooms both along the offensive and defensive lines, and that's how you win in football in general, but specifically in the SEC. You have to be strong up front. You have to be good in the trenches, and they've made a good effort to that. Shout out to Coach Thornton, man. Coach Thornton has come in and there have been a wide range of thoughts about his prowess and being able to get quality talent in here to Auburn based upon what he was not able to do at Ole Miss as an offensive line coach. But he's done a good job of flipping that room 2 years consecutively, right? Like
Portal
when
and
when
high
when they,
school for sure.
yeah, when they got in here, the offensive line was a problem. Let's be clear, and I'm not going to go calling any names today of who I'm speaking of, but we watched the film together of the 2022 season and we watched the turnstiles that were happening up there on that offensive line. And we watched quarterbacks and running backs not have the ability to even get started on plays, right? And it wasn't some phenomenal line last year, but you absolutely made improvements last year over what you had seen really for the last 3 or 4 years prior to that. Um, so shout out to them for actually being able to go and accomplish that in a school, where it's not as if Auburn has some rich heritage of offensive line, right?
Right.
Like there are some guys who made it to the league from the offensive line, and this is what gives me encouragement about the other positions that are coming into Auburn is that you don't have the history of offensive line like an Oklahoma or a USC,
Wisconsin.
constant like yeah, there's some schools LSU like Bama, right? Like that have been putting O linemen in the league consistently over the
Yeah.
last 20 years, really, right? Like, and you can go back even further with that with some of these places. Auburn doesn't have that history. But you're seeing more and more talented guys get into the room. So you're putting yourself in a position to at least have a shot at it, right? When we go and look at the offensive line boards for next season, I expect a couple of guys from Auburn to be out there having the potential to get drafted this year.
Mm.
And that is it largely in part to this staff because the guys who we would be having that conversation about were not recruited by anybody else. It's not like they've been here just sitting on the shelf and they got developed into that. No, they were either brought here from the transfer portal or subsequently, when we're talking years into the future, are going to be freshman classes that were brought in here by Coach Hugh Freeze if they stick around. All right. So shout out to them for being able to do that. And they seem to be getting the quality to a better depth now.
And I like the fact too, and that they're getting the guys that they want. I think that's been major when you consider what Thornton has been able to do. And again, a year ago, people were skeptical of Thornton because it seems like recruiting from the high school level was kind of slow as it pertains to the offensive line room. But it was taking Thornton time to build some of these relationships. Jacoby Ward is a prime example of that because he was targeted last year, and now we're
Mm,
starting to see the fruits of what Thornton has been able to do in terms of building relationships with offensive linemen. And again, it really is about relationships with offensive linemen. They start really early with some of these kids, and so we're
right.
beginning to see Thornton begin to work some of his magic from a high school level. We saw it a year ago when he what he was doing with the portal, bringing in some guys from Group of Five programs, JUCO. He was bringing in different guys to plug and play so that we can have guys ready to go uh, come game time. Now you're bringing in some kids that are from the high school level that's going to have to get in your strength and conditioning program and really begin to develop. That's another thing, Ike, that we haven't seen a lot. When you talk about guys
Yeah.
going to the league, we haven't seen kids come in, get through the strength and conditioning program, and in a year or two are ready to contribute. We've been primarily grabbing guys from either transfer portal elsewhere to come in and play. Just like the QB position, we want to see us bring in a kid from high school and they actually develop and be that offensive lineman who can get to the next level or
Yeah.
be an all SEC offensive lineman, right? That's something that we need to see. It's good to see that we're seeing Thornton recruit and bring in guys and fill needs because again, what I'm looking forward to seeing is that we're not asking interior linemen to go play tackle. Hugh Freeze are
Right.
he's bringing in offensive tackles that they're natural at that position and now they can play that position, right? So whenever we experience injuries moving forward, there's a guy who can step in who's a natural at that position. That's something I'm
Right.
looking forward to under this coaching staff as well. So again, this is a positive sign. I'm happy to see that we have offensive tackles, plural, Ike, in this recruiting
Right.
cycle and in previous recruiting classes. So it's exciting to see. Hollis Davidson. Hollis Davidson was a tight end who uh, recommitted, reaffirmed his commitment. He is one of two tight ends committed for this class. Uh, what are your thoughts about the tight end position moving? This seems like another position group that will be in good hands because this is again one of the type of tight ends that Hugh Freeze likes. A guy who can uh, play out in the slot, a guy who can go catch passes, a guy who can play in the flat, whatever the case may be. What are your thoughts about the position group, the tight end position group under Hugh Freeze? Do you believe it's in good hands so far in terms of our recruiting, in terms of the talent we're bringing in?
Yeah, I definitely like the direction that it's moving. It's clear, like you said, that they're focusing on guys who can be pass catchers in the tight end room. We just did the film review, I believe Saturday. I posted the Rico Walker film review, and he's not your road graded guy who's gonna be out there, you know, pancaking guys from the tight end
Right.
position. He's a receiver,
Right.
right? Like he's a big physical guy, and he doesn't mind taking contact and even dishing out contact, but he's not going to be the guy that is going to grade out as the best blocker in your pass catching core. Um, and I'm assuming that that's kind of going to be the mold going forward. You look at Rivaldo Fairweather, really similar, right?
Right.
Like Rivaldo's not a great blocker. He's a big physical guy, doesn't mind contact, but he's not a great blocker, not technically sound in that. And he's not out there just really walking guys to the sideline from the tight end position, but he absolutely is a weapon from the tight end position that you can move around to a lot of different spots and be able to affect the defenses in a lot of different ways with mismatches that he presents with just his size and his speed at that size. So you look at Rico Walker, very similar kind of guy. And the two guys that they've got, I think Ryan Gia is, I don't know if I'm pronouncing his last name correctly, and then now Hollis Davidson. Both of those guys kind of fit that same mold of guys who are going to be vertical threat. Well, not necessarily vertical, but pass catching threats from the tight end position. You can move them out to the slot and you can do some things offensively to get yourself some mismatches against a safety or a linebacker. And so that's kind of been the mold of what Coach Hugh Freeze has done throughout his career from that tight end position. It's been those guys who really are kind of hybrids. They're really big
Right.
receivers. They're another receiving threat, but in the tight end position, but they're big enough to be able to give you a good chip block or give you that presence in the interior of being able to block, but then you slide them out. Um, so looking forward to seeing what they're going to be able to do with those guys coming up here into the future.
It's the month of July, Ike. Obviously, fall camp starts next month, but July is important from a recruiting standpoint because this is the month of Big Cat Weekend.
Yep.
Um, that's obviously a big month, especially with this coaching staff here that has prioritized recruiting. Last year, Big Cat was a big deal. We got two major commitments that week, flipping Perry Thompson being one of those guys. So we expect
Yeah.
to see some big news. Ant Robinson, appreciate you being here with us. He says we have a lot of recruits we are in the top three for. He believes that Big Cat will have five commitments. You have guys who are committing this month. As a matter of fact, one of them being Anquan Fegans, who Auburn is one of the favorites for. Juju Lewis has been said to actually be ready to close and shut down his recruitment getting into the season. He wants to focus on his senior year. So will Auburn be able to flip him? Will he remain committed to USC, or will Colorado sneak in there? That's something that remains to be seen. So this is an important month. What are your thoughts about this staff and their ability to really, when I say I use the term loosely, close, but it's not signing day. But what are
Yeah.
your thoughts about this staff and their ability to really make inroads on some of the big, major recruits that we're in it for this month?
Yeah, this is going to be this is where Auburn's got to make ground for some of the bigger ones. There the thing with Perry Thompson last year is there was a lot of smoke to that happening prior to Big Cat weekend, and there's a couple of people who are in very similar positions going into Big Cat where it's like uh you know you could absolutely get this commitment coming up into this weekend, and it's always going to be a big recruiting weekend. And I think just for the, pardon the pun, but for the splash of it all, because we remember Perry
Yes.
Thompson throwing Coach Hugh Freeze into the pool last year. But for the splash of it all, they kind of ask guys to wait to announce during that weekend so that they can make it a big thing. So I'm looking forward to seeing what comes from this weekend as far as recruitment is concerned. And listen, there were a lot of guys who um, well, not a lot, but there have been guys who have gone to Big Cat weekend and said, "Man, it was difficult for me to not just walk away and commit right
Right.
then because of the atmosphere that's created by this coaching staff during that weekend." And that's Big Cats didn't start under Coach Hugh Freeze, but that is a return to what Big Cat weekend had
Right.
been, where it's this major recruiting event. It's not just a time for you to come visit. This is when we're going to put our best foot forward, and we're going to make you feel like this is home. Yeah, well, you're gonna walk away from Big Cat weekend saying, "Yeah, that's where I want to go play football," not just I got another opportunity to come visit and get some FaceTime with a couple of group coaches. No, we're gonna come in and, like you said, we're gonna close the deal on a couple of guys, and they're gonna walk away saying, "Auburn's where I want to be playing football for the next." What's the catchphrase or the phrase they always say, for the next 2 to 3 or 3 to 4 years
Yeah.
where I'll be playing my football. Like that's where you get those kind of statements coming out of. And so I'm looking forward to seeing what they're able to do this time around because, Coach Hugh Freeze just said recently he feels good about being able to close in the top five or close
Close
to
to
it.
it. Yeah. This is an important month
So
if he's going
yeah,
to do
this
that.
this is where you gotta have to, because I think now even more so with the way that the recruiting windows are, and with early signing day really being the big signing day, a lot of these young men, they don't want to have to go into their senior season still having to deal with this stuff, because it was different when signing day was closer to the end of the year because football season was done.
Right.
And though schools were still contacting you and you were still getting, recruited during that time, the pressure and the intensity from the schools wasn't as high because you weren't up against the window of early signing day, right?
Right.
And going into that senior season, you kind of just want to enjoy it. So a lot of them really want to make their decisions where they're going to be before football season starts this fall for them in high school of their senior year. And that means Big Cat is a really big day for
Right.
Auburn because that's going to be the last major opportunity that you're going to have for some of these guys before football season starts for them, right? Because August they're shutting it down,
Some of these kids are
right? Like
competing for
they're
state championships, and so they really want to
yeah,
focus on winning in that regard and going out with a bang in
yeah,
high school. So yeah, yeah. Before they switch gears,
yeah,
you want to be the last impression on their mind. And one of the
yep,
things that I like to Ike about what this coaching staff has done is they've put the big back in Big Cat. Like there are some big time players
right,
here, and those guys want to play with other big time players. So when you have a Perry Thompson throwing Hugh Freeze in the pool, and you have other guys who are there present, I think earlier that week, I think Demarcus Riddick, who also was at Big Cat, committed leading up to that
hmm
event. So when you got big names like that, and those guys talk to each other.
yeah. Malcolm Simmons committed during Big Cat,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
Like you
So
just had those
so
big
when you
names out
have
there.
those
Yeah,
guys and these are players that you wouldn't mind playing with, you're seeing them there and they are taking in Auburn and they're realizing, hey, this really does feel like home. That is very infectious for other guys who perhaps may not have had Auburn as high as some other schools. It gives them something to think about because not only can I enjoy an atmosphere like Auburn, be able to play in the SEC, but I'm playing with some really talented guys who are just as enthusiastic, if not more enthusiastic about Auburn. So, kudos to this coaching staff for making Big Cat really relevant again in terms of Auburn recruiting because it
right.
wasn't as relevant in years prior to this point, and last year was kind of a change, and so I expect to see more of the same this year with some really big names, and who knows, there may be some announcements that weekend. I'll be excited to see it. Hopefully that would they continue the tradition of throwing Hugh Freeze in the pool because he's flipped someone or got a major commitment. We'll definitely keep you locked there. Let's
Yeah, I'm definitely looking forward to
Yeah,
that. And I'm hoping that, like you said, two or three big names would be really great to see the commitment from. Again, I'm not like a major commitment guy. I'm more so a signing guy.
sure.
But for momentum's sake, it's good to have the commitments happening because, you know, these young men want to go and stack the deck. They
Yeah,
do. Like this is the kind of situation where it's like, I don't want to be the guy to go try to turn the program around by myself. I need a bunch of other guys that I know are going to be there as well. So it's not that they don't want to compete against these big schools. They just want to know they're going to have some help when they get there, and it's not going to just be me trying to figure it out here. It's like, nah, we got a whole squad of folks that's going to pull up down there to the plains this year, and we're going to be a problem
right.
when we're there. So I'm hoping that this is like you said, a continued trajectory of classes that are going to be signing or commitments that are going to be made during Big Cat weekend to get you to this next realm or next tier that Auburn's trying to fight its way
And
into.
you said momentum. That's the word that I want to focus on because you remember around this time a year ago, Cam Coleman committed out the blue to Texas A&M, and people were down. People just knew that he was going to commit to Auburn. But after Big Cat, it's almost as though people began to feel really optimistic about Cam Coleman, even though it appears as though he was heading to Texas A&M because you were able to flip Perry Thompson, because you were able to get Demarcus Riddick to flip from Georgia and commit to Auburn over Bama, right? Seeing that type of momentum gives you a lot of encouragement and hope that, hey, maybe we can finish outside the top five or in the top five, right? Big Cat is almost kind of you're rounding third, getting into home stretch going into fall. So if they're
Right.
able to end, if they're able to end the month of July achieving the goals that they've had set for this month, I like what Hugh Freeze is saying, and he feels confident that they can close to a top five class. He knows something that we don't. I look forward to seeing it all unfold.
Yeah, and I listen, to be clear, they were confident that they'd be able to get close to top 5 last year,
Yeah,
right? Like you remember, we caught up with them at Big Cat and he was like, "Hey man, top 5 is where they're trying to what they're
yeah.
aiming for." And they were really just one player signing that I think that they thought they had in the
We're down
bag,
to the final.
so
Yeah,
to
it
speak.
went down
Yeah.
bag literally. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
I think it came down to like just getting that one guy that they thought they had closed, and it just didn't happen there at the end for them to be in the top five.
Yeah.
So this year they're like, listen, man, we got to do what we got to do to get there. And I think that they realize kind of what game it is that they're playing now a little bit
Mhm.
more than they realized last year. So I expect them to come in ready to get some guys to make those commitments and really solidify where this class is going to end up. I think it's going to be interesting though. Um, some of the guys sometimes feel deprioritized once you start really turning the pressure up on someone else.
Mhm.
And so I think it's going to be interesting to see uh how some of the guys that are on this that are currently in this commitment fold, how prioritized they still feel after seeing them go after some of these bigger names. And I think the biggest thing is going to be kind of who the quarterback is going to be in this class. If they take a QB, like how do you focus in on a guy without making this other guy feel neglected? Because if you swing and you miss, now you don't get either of them.
Right.
And so
Right.
it's going to be an interesting decision process coming down the wire for this staff on how they on what direction they want to go with a couple of these commitments that they're trying to go
Wide
after.
receivers is an example of that, right? So once the picture becomes clear in terms of who the QB is going to be in this class, I think you're gonna you're it's going to be a clearer picture for your wide receivers. Like if you do get a Juju, obviously that changes some things for you in terms of the
Right.
recruit. So once that becomes once that becomes crystal clear, this coaching staff can really hit the ground running in some other position groups.
For full episodes, make sure you head over to the War Report's YouTube channel and check out the Weekend Tailgate. Every Sunday, we're going live. Join us on the live stream at 1 p.m. Central Standard Time. Until the next time, War Eagle.